The scream cut through the quiet countryside like a jagged tear in silk. It was the kind of scream that made birds scatter and hearts freeze, desperate, raw, and soaked in fear. Somewhere beyond the old wooden fence that divided the meadow from the dirt road, a boy, no older than 10, fell to his knees, his voice breaking as he shouted for help. His mother, trembling and pale, was just a few feet away, but 3 tattooed men towered over her, their faces twisted in rage. They shoved her back every time she tried to reach her son, and just when it seemed like there was no escape, a flash of fur vaulted over the fence, a German shepherd with eyes blazing like embers and a growl that promised reckoning. What happened next would not only change their lives, but also become a story the town would whisper about for years. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the unbreakable loyalty of animals, please like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who loves dogs, and subscribe to Pawsitive Tales to never miss stories like this one. For months, life had been a living nightmare for Elena and her 10-year-old son, Noah. Once a cheerful woman who taught art classes at the local community center, Elena had become a shell of her former self, withdrawn, sleepless, and constantly looking over her shoulder. The reason was buried in the glow of her phone screen, a series of messages that had started as threats and turned into something far darker. It began innocently enough. A stranger had contacted her online, claiming to have compromising photos of her from a party years ago, photos she never even knew existed. The man threatened to release them to the public unless she paid him a large sum of money. Terrified of losing her job, her reputation, and Noah's trust, Elena paid. But the demands didn't stop. The man wanted more. More money, more control. And when she couldn't pay anymore, he showed up at her door. The man's name was Bruno, and he wasn't alone. He and his brothers were known around town, not for anything good, but for the way they made people disappear. They didn't just want money now. They wanted Elena to sign over the deed to the small house she had inherited from her grandmother. It was all she had, the only safe haven she and Noah had ever known. When Elena refused, Bruno's threats turned brutal. He began following her, waiting outside Noah's school, sending photos of them both taken without their knowledge. And then, one evening, he crossed a line Elena never thought he would. He broke into her backyard. That night, Elena stood in her kitchen clutching a kitchen knife, her heart pounding so loud she thought it might wake Noah upstairs. And then, from the shadows of the yard, a low growl answered her fear. It was Ranger, the German shepherd she had rescued 2 years ago from a shelter. Ranger had been a broken soul then, trembling at the sound of raised voices. But Elena and Noah had given him love and patience, and in return he had become their silent guardian. That night, Ranger placed himself between Elena and the door, teeth bared at the intruder on the other side. Bruno left, but his message was clear: "Next time I won't knock." Elena called the police, but without hard evidence there was little they could do. Days passed in a blur of anxiety until the afternoon of the school fair. Noah had begged her to let him go. "Just for an hour, Mom." Against her better judgment, Elena agreed. It was supposed to be a normal day, a tiny piece of the childhood Bruno had been trying to steal from them. But when she arrived to pick Noah up, he was gone. Panic clawed at her throat. She called the school, the police, anyone who might know something. Then her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "If you ever want to see your boy again, bring the deed. Tonight, alone." She followed the instructions. The meeting place was an abandoned field just beyond the edge of town, where an old split-rail fence marked the end of the property line. And there, under the grey afternoon sky, she saw them, Bruno and his brothers, standing over a crying Noah. "Give it to us!" Bruno hissed, his voice slick with triumph. "Or you'll never see him again." Elena's hands shook as she held out the envelope containing the deed. She could barely hear Noah calling for her over the blood rushing in her ears. She stepped forward, and one of Bruno's brothers shoved her back hard, his hand clamping down on her shoulder. She stumbled, gasping, as the men closed in around her. But they had forgotten something. They had forgotten Ranger. He had followed Elena quietly, padding behind the car and slipping into the tall grass without a sound. And now, crouched behind the fence, he saw the woman who had saved him being manhandled. He saw the boy who had fed him treats and whispered secrets into his fur, crying out in terror. And something primal surged inside him. With a snarl that cracked like thunder, Ranger launched himself over the fence. Time seemed to slow. Elena saw a blur of black and tan, Bruno's face twist in sudden fear, and Noah's eyes widen with hope. Ranger hit the ground running, teeth flashing and muscles coiled. One of Bruno's brothers turned too late. Ranger was on him in a heartbeat, knocking him flat and forcing his arm away from Elena. The second man lunged at Ranger, but the dog twisted, clamping his jaws on the man's wrist, just hard enough to make him drop the knife he'd been hiding. Bruno stumbled back, shouting orders that no one followed. The last thing he expected was a dog this fearless, a dog who moved not out of training but out of pure, unwavering love. Noah broke free and ran into his mother's arms. Elena held him so tightly she thought she might never let go. Bruno, seeing the tide turn, tried to grab the deed from Elena's hands, but Ranger stepped between them, teeth bared, growl rumbling like distant thunder. This time, Bruno didn't move closer. The sirens came a moment later. Elena hadn't been as alone as Bruno thought. She'd called the police from a second phone she'd hidden in her coat. They arrived just in time to see the scene. 2 men on the ground, disarmed and terrified, one backing away from a German shepherd whose eyes never left his. Bruno and his brothers were arrested on the spot. The evidence on their phones and the testimony from Elena and Noah were enough to put them behind bars for years. And as they were led away in handcuffs, Ranger trotted back to Elena's side, his tail wagging softly, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But for Elena and Noah, everything had changed. The days that followed were not easy. The fear didn't vanish overnight. But slowly, life began to feel normal again. Noah returned to school. Elena reopened her art classes. And every evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ranger would sit by the porch steps, eyes scanning the street, ever watchful. He wasn't just a pet anymore. He was family. He was proof that even in the darkest moments, loyalty and love could become a force stronger than fear. And perhaps most importantly, he was a reminder that no one, no matter how broken, is beyond saving. Ranger had once been abandoned and forgotten, but given a second chance, he had become a hero. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who loves animals, and subscribe to Pawsitive Tales for more real, emotional stories of courage and loyalty. Special request, comment below and tell us, do you believe dogs can sense when we're in danger? We'd love to hear your thoughts and stories.